I wanted to take a moment to introduce Aimee to those of you who might not know her before she comes up and reads the gospel. But Aimee has been attending our church for many months now with her two lovely daughters sitting up here in front, Sahara and Mika. And Aimee graduated 1 year ahead of me at Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. And not everybody who graduates with a Master's of Divinity wants to go into ministry in a church. And Aimee's interests lied more in chaplaincy, and now she's going to be getting mediation training. So we take our love for the gospel and the teachings of Christ with us out into the world, and no matter what we're doing, it is ministry. So I'm very happy to have her here today and to hear her voice. I think it's important for us to hear different voices from the pulpit, not just mine all the time. So we are blessed by your presence here today, and let us prepare ourselves to hear a word of good news.
Thank you. Our gospel reading is Luke 12:22 through 31. I know it says it's a little farther. Oh, sorry. I wore heels, but apparently it's not enough. We're going to be going Luke 12:22 to 31. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap, they have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your lifespan? If you are not able to do such a small thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothed the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow and thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And you do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well." Dale, you did such a wonderful job with the message. I almost don't think I need to do this sermon. I want to tell you a story. It was in 2002, and I was working in a military hospital. Now, I mention this because it couldn't have happened in any other place. Although I don't plan on talking about socialized medicine or Medicare for all or any of that here today, I would like you to take note that this is what it looks like when insurance is not a factor in your health care. So I showed up at my shift, and I was immediately met by a team of doctors. There was a special circumstance this time. There was a married couple. We'll call them John and Sue. Honestly, I can't remember their names at this point. It's been a while. But I would change their names if I could. Either way, we'll just call them John and Sue. John and Sue had been married 60 years at that point. John was a veteran, Sue was his spouse, and both qualified for services at the hospital. Both were very sick. Sue needed a heart transplant, and John's issues were just as dire, and both needed to be in the hospital. The problem was they would not leave each other's side. They would not be admitted at the same time because they would end up on different ends of the hospital, and each one said that they would rather put themselves in danger by waiting for treatment rather than not be there for the other. So the doctors concocted a plan. Sue was my patient. They put Sue in a private room, and then they brought a cot in for John so that he could sleep there as well. Sue was my patient, but I took care of John as well. Off the records, we fed them both, we gave medicine to both, we treated both of them, but Sue was only technically my patient. And then when she was fully healed, they swapped beds and we did it all again. And then John was my patient. And I learned a lot from John and Sue. In 60 years of marriage, they had a lot of sage advice for me. One of the things that struck me most was when I was talking to them about fear. I had mentioned something about locking doors, and John said, "Oh, we never lock our doors." He said, "You see, Mal, we live out in the country, really, really far in a rural area. It's like a mile just to see our neighbor." Now, I thought where he was going with this was that his house was so low risk, he was so far out in the boonies, nobody would ever rob a place like that. I was wrong. What he actually told me was so striking. He said, "Mal, it's so far to our neighbor, and there were no cell phones. If a car broke down near our house and we were not there to see it, how would those poor people get help? We didn't lock our doors when we went on vacation or for small trips or anything. We needed to make sure that if someone was in trouble, they could come into our home and use the phone. We made sure if we were going on vacation, our pantry was fully stocked, because if help couldn't come immediately, they would be hungry and need a place to be. It would be tragic to do anything less. That struck me so much. That used to be the view. Where did we go so wrong? Jesus lived in a very political time too. He understood that fear was a weapon. And in our times, it's become the weapon of choice. And it's harming our relationship with God. Proverbs 29:25, fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. Fear of the unknown is uncommon, and it's understandable. But we have gotten to a point where fear of the unknown is paralyzing. How can we care for the stranger when we are afraid of the stranger? How can we extend compassion with such fear of others? And politics has made it their platform, this othering of people. Fear is profitable. Fear is political. It's keeping the masses afraid to the benefit of those in power. But it hurts our heart and it hurts our soul. Be not afraid. We hear this over and over again in the Bible. Be not afraid. Proverbs 12:25, an anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. It doesn't take much to be kind to a stranger, and the kindness itself is contagious. It spreads like wildfire. Just a small act of kindness is all it takes. When you're kind to someone, they turn and walk away with a smile, and that smile brightens another person's day, and the cycle goes on and on. At one point in my life, I realized I had a great amount of fear. In fact, I realized that a lot of my life was revolving around fear. I would go around locking all the doors and checking all the windows, and I lived in the city where there were lots of strangers. I had a car that was so old that honestly I would pity anybody that actually had tried to steal it. I don't think they would have gotten very far with that stick shift the way it was. And it didn't even have a car radio, so it's not like there was really anything to steal. And yet every day I would lock its doors. And it finally dawned on me that the fear itself was likely doing more harm to me than anything that could happen to this car. So I tried an experiment. I very purposefully did not lock my car. I made a choice that I would stop locking my car and see what happened, something of a social experiment. So let me tell you what happened. For the rest of the time of owning that car, I did not lock it. Sometimes I actually forgot to close the windows. Nothing was ever stolen. I mean, granted, there was not a lot to be stolen, but no one ever bothered my car or caused harm. On one of the days my windows were left open while I was living in the city, someone left a 6-pack of beer on my driver's seat. I'll grant you that was odd, but it was definitely not malicious. Another time it started to rain, so someone covered my window so that my car would not get wet. When I stopped locking my doors, the only thing that happened was that it allowed strangers to be kind. The only thing I was locking out was opportunities for other people to be helpful to me. Later on in life, after my military service, I didn't actually have my car broken into once. I did actually have my car broken into once. Only once. And of all things, it was because of a patient. You see, he had wanted to give me a gift. He hadn't been my patient. When he arrived, he actually checked himself out because he couldn't get the Wi-Fi. He discharged himself so quick, and his wife turned around and brought him straight back. So they brought me in, and I helped him with tech support, and I got him all set up with Wi-Fi so that he could continue his work. And one day in the dining hall, he got me talking about gas mileage and, what kind of car do you drive? And I didn't think anything of it until the day that he was discharged. You see, there was a policy of no gifts. So he had come up with a plan. And when he was discharged, he went into the nurse's station, got my keys from the mailbox where I tended to toss them, and went into my car, left a gift on my driver's seat, and returned my keys to the nurse's station. And it wasn't until I was getting ready to leave my shift, and I got to my car, and there was a backpack just sitting on my driver's seat. So there wasn't much to be done at that point. He was already discharged, and I still have the backpack. But even more so, I have the knowledge that that one time my car was actually broken into, it was still an act of kindness. This season, when you are flooded with messages to be afraid, I want you to think of this. I want you to really ask, what are the actual risks? When commercials tell me to be afraid of immigrants, what am I actually afraid of? That they are different than me? That they speak a different language than me? How does that harm me? And how much does the fear of them actually cost me? When the fear of the other causes direct harm to those others, doesn't that hurt my soul? Doesn't that cost me my morality? If the fear of the unknown has caused me to act in a way to another human being that I would never want to see done to myself or anyone I do know, that causes harm to me. It's a moral injury. There is a reason that there is so much dehumanizing of the other. It's because compassion is the enemy of fear. But compassion doesn't sell. Compassion doesn't tend to make a profit. Compassion doesn't make people want to buy security systems or create more border security jobs or keep out the needy. Compassion isn't profitable. But it is God's mandate. But it's not good money. And fear makes people act against their best interests. Fear makes people act against societal good. Fear makes for good business. Luke 12:22-26. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, or what you will wear. Life is more than food, and your body more than clothes. Psalm 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Sometimes when I talk of fear, I feel hypocritical. There is tons of fear in my life. I do walk around my house, locking the doors at night. I do worry about the what-ifs, and I do have my barriers. And it wouldn't be right to tell you that I live a life without fear. My life is full of fears. And I think it's because of that I have come to recognize that I have to put my fear aside many days to make sure that I have not lost my compassion. That when I see a stranger in need of help, I can assess the situation. That I won't be paralyzed by it. And when I can extend help to that stranger. It's so hard to teach kids stranger danger and still teach them compassion for the stranger. We were driving along Route 90 on an incredibly hot day, and we came across a truck, a very, very beat-up old pickup truck. And I'm not sure if it was on fire yet or just smoking that badly, but it was most definitely disabled.
I remember that.
And a moment later, we came across the owner of that truck, who had started walking to the nearest exit. And I knew that exit was very far away. And the day was well into the 90s. So I stopped and picked him up. No one else was going to, and I knew it needed to be done. And we drove him to the next exit and dropped him off at a gas station where he could safely wait for help to arrive. And he seemed amazed that we would actually be willing to help him. A mom with kids in the car picking up a strange man. It goes against everything that we are taught these days. We are taught to be afraid of the strange man on the side of the road. But that stranger on the side of the road could be you. And that truck was billowing smoke. If that had been a ruse, it would have been the most elaborate I had ever heard of. It was low risk and it was compassionate. And yes, I do have fear when it comes to picking up a strange man like that. When I have a situation like that, I have to make a choice. And each time I make a conscious choice to put my fear aside and make a compassionate choice. Another stranger I chose to help one day was a man who had run out of gas in Henrietta. He had run out of gas and left his wallet at home, and the girls and I were getting ice cream when he approached us. The people at the shop looked at him with such disdain when he was asking for help. My first words to him were, "I believe you." And in that moment, he looked like he might cry. Initially, I just gave him a few dollars so that he would be able to get back home, but when I saw him walking along the road, we stopped and drove him back to his car as well. He was a regular person, just like you or I, but in that moment of needing help, he may as well have been homeless. He told me that he had asked for water at one place and been refused. He had been spat on and sworn at, and he had been treated the lowest of low. And the only thing he had done to deserve all of this was forget his wallet on a day his gas tank was low. This is what fear looks like. If we are to be children of God, we need to follow the refrain that has been repeated throughout the Bible. Be not afraid. Be not afraid, for God is with you. John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. When your fears rule you, it hurts your soul, because you can't hear when God speaks. So go in peace, and there's no harm in locking your doors at night or locking your car when you go to the store. There's no harm in the little security rituals that we have, but do not carry fear in your heart, because when you're faced with the decisions to act compassionately or out of fear, please don't be ruled by fear. Thank you.
Let us join together in singing one last time. Number 353, A Shelter in the Time of Storm.
Time
bless God and proclaims God's greatness into the world as you leave this place. For God has chosen us to be priests to our neighbors. There is glory in humble tasks done in God's name, and abounding joy awaits you in God's service. So go now in peace and serve the Lord. Amen.